And sports are always stressful, but I feel like today, just with social media and things like that, there's so much more pressure put on pitchers that there's also a lot of confidence issues.
Have to take control to say, this is what I want to do the first time through the lineup. I want to be heavy here, and then the second, help them, but you have to communicate. You can't just keep it all in.
I encourage all my girls to talk to their coaches. I encourage them to shake off a pitch.
Yes.
But again, there's that fear of is my pitch
me?
Or even worse, if you do shake off the pitch that they call, then you throw what you want and it gets hit.
I know. Welcome to the Weekly Dose. My name is Jamie Southern, and today we have Jill Stevens from Fastpitch Power. And if you follow them on social media, you will see the following they have, and you will understand why, because what she teaches is pretty legit. So if you're a new beginner pitcher and you're searching for correct mechanics and just good knowledge of getting a good base as you start your journey, I would follow Fastpitch Power because she knows what she's talking about, and she does wonderful videos that are easy for pitchers of all ages to understand and maybe fine tune just a little bit if you're wanting more speed or you're inconsistent, right? We know that when we're inconsistent and we want more speed, then we have to look at our mechanics. So, Jill, in January, we really focused on knowing who you are as a pitcher and allowing the pitchers to have a game plan, right? Not to give out all their secrets the first inning, and to approach the games where they can go the 7 innings instead of being pulled before the third time through the lineup. And so that was our focus, of more about the pitcher looking within. So as we get to know you right now, who were you as a pitcher? Tell us your journey, what your strengths and weaknesses were.
I want to say I was the minority of pitchers, because I know that especially these days, things are so different.
So different.
And when I was pitching, especially with the introduction of social media, and you have every girl out there posting her videos, and they're oh, I hit 68 miles an hour today, and it puts so much pressure on other pitchers that there's a lot of stress, I feel like. And sports are always stressful, but I feel like today, just with social media and things like that, there's so much more pressure put on pitchers that there's also a lot of confidence issues.
Yes.
That is really, and I always say that the mental side of pitching is just as, if not even more important than the physical and the mechanics and stuff. It takes a really special kind of mentality to be a strong pitcher. And for whatever reason, just since I started pitching, I never had any issues with confidence. I just would go out there and be I'm going to strike you out, and it's no big deal, and you're not going to be able to hit me. And I don't know where that mentality came from, because I did struggle. At the beginning, I remember, so really dating myself here, hold on.
That's okay.
When I first started pitching, when you would first start learning pitching, you would throw slingshot. Do you remember slingshot?
Yes, I remember in our rec league, that's what pitchers did. And we got
part of it.
Yes.
Push and guide the ball to the plate. And I was pretty accurate doing that. And then when I started to get into the travel ball, when I was 9, 10, my dad, again, who taught me how to pitch, Coach Phil, was all right, Jill, we got to start doing, now it's just called fast pitch. It was called just windmill pitching back then. And I was so wildly inaccurate when I started windmill pitching. I literally remember asking my dad, I was can I just go back to slingshot? At least I could throw strikes. And he was no, you have to learn how to do windmill. And I would throw hard, but it would go all over the place.
Yes.
But then I was just I didn't care. I would just throw. And eventually I got more accurate and more speed. And especially, it probably would have been different if I had lived in an area where softball was bigger. If you lived on the East Coast, but in New York and on the East Coast, just at that time, it just was not as big. So throwing at the speed that I did growing up, very few people could hit me. So
yeah.
Someone once asked, what do you think comes first, success or confidence? And I would definitely say success.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's really hard, like when you're struggling so much and you're not getting those outcomes, those good outcomes, to be confident. But at the same time, to have success, you also need confidence. So it's kind of like the chicken and the egg thing. But I just found that from the start, I just was, for whatever reason, pretty successful. It helped that my dad took the time to like research like the biomechanics and like what was correct. So I was not like taught hello elbow, for example, from the start. I was not taught, you know, the open door, close the hips and shoulders method.
Yes.
It's kind of off to a good start just because of what my dad learned from like some other coaches. And so I just had that success and I never really had those confidence issues, but I know that so many girls do. And it's important to definitely kind of have that presence as a pitcher because it makes
and I feel like how you were like, I just had this confidence because we didn't have the internet. We didn't have all this doubt of like, am I doing this wrong? We just went out there and we just found a way.
My college video was on VHS. Like, you had to like get someone to come film and it was on VHS and then you had to mail it to the coaches. And now you can just like take your phone, put it on YouTube and like send a link to a coach. It's just so different.
So when you say like, okay, so we kind of know like how you started and you had that, which is very rare because I was taught to finish, not hello elbow, like way up here, but open your door, shut the door. That was all something that I was taught on the West Coast because I'm originally from California. And I look back at my mechanics and I'm like, how was I so successful? Because I was flawed, my back foot collapsed. My back foot collapsed just like a second and then it pulled back up, but my glove, and I didn't have I think it was just being athletic and like finding a way. And I was that pitcher, like I'm going to beat you and I'm going to find a way to beat you. And I had good movement and I'm just like, maybe it was just lucky, I don't know, because now what we're learning is like, it's completely, even though we were taught it, the people that were taught it, we didn't do it in our pitch, right?
I was just going to say.
Yes. So
unfortunately, that's still the situation. Especially when sometimes college players come out of college and then want to become pitching coaches, they'll teach that hello elbow and those.
I know.
They were taught, even though that's not how they threw in the game.
Right.
So back at yourself, like it may not have been how you actually threw. Your body may have like reverted to what's actually natural. And
yes.
So
yes. So what pitches did you throw? Like, what was your game plan? Like, who were you when you went on the mound? And I would say more in college, probably when you really established who you were.
So I really liked to get ahead in the count. That was like a really big thing for me and a really big thing that I teach my pitchers today. If you get ahead in the count, you're in control. And that adds to the confidence as well, because it's like, I've got the batters on their toes.
Right.
So you're in control of the situation. You're in control of the count. So that's like really, really, really big for me. And I try to get that, whatever pitch that you feel like. For me, again, I threw at a speed that was kind
What
of.
was your speed? What was your speed?
So like, again, I'm like really, so like when I was in college, I went to college in 2007. So
okay. Well, I'm older than you.
At that time, my top speed was 71 miles an hour.
Wow.
With the average being like 68 to 69.
Okay.
And I had a off speed as well. And
that was deadly.
These days, you've got Montana Fouts who hits like 75 miles an hour. And it's just like not even special anymore. But like that.
No, but I think the ESPN clocks are off.
They are. Yeah. A lot of pitchers who definitely are in the 70s. Rachel.
Yes.
Certainly can hit.
For sure.
But that's much more common these days now that there is better strength training and there are more pitchers being taught the correct mechanics.
Right.
But back in the day, that was like even like 60s and mid 60s was very rare. So
yes.
For me, I would always try to get ahead in the count with really well placed fastballs.
Yeah.
Outside, nice and low.
Right.
And once I got ahead in the count, I really had fun with my movement pitches. My
Yes.
curve and my rise were like my bread and butter, especially my rise ball had really quite a lot of break. And I will definitely admit that I was not as confident in my changeup as I like my girls to be, because I notice sometimes that power pitchers sometimes struggle with the changeup because it's a pitch that does not have that whip and snap. I had fairly decent command, but like I wasn't confident enough usually, unless it was like a really good day, to throw it like 3 and 2, for example. But it was like 1 and 2. I would sometimes get them with the changeup, but my curve and my rise were
your strikeouts.
Definitely my strikeout pitches, yes, for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love hearing everybody's journey of just knowing who they were, and because it's different for everyone. So it's like, it's special. It's like who you were, you know, and people. I have a pitcher at Idaho State that we said she's like our second fastest thrower. And I'm like, listen, I need you to just spot your fastball on the inside, because the location is more important than having, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's true.
Also, first of all, for being a coach who uses fastballs.
Yeah.
Number of girls who come to me still and say like, oh, my coach said that once I get to the higher levels, I'll never throw fastballs again. Just like there's spotted fastballs, again, not saying throw a fastball directly down the middle of the plate, but spotted fastballs are so great for getting ahead, setting up other pitches, and even striking. So good for you.
Yes. Well, and I was the same. I mean, my freshman year in college, I was a little timid to throw my curveball, which a curveball was really good, but to those lefty slappers. And so I would just spot my fastball right on the river, and it would strike them out. It would, you know, catch them. And so, and even my drop ball in college wasn't like my go-to, but if I needed something low, I would just, you know, I had such command over it. So it is something that should still be considered, and you should work on your locations and command with a fastball, because that's really what it is. We want movement, but if you can spot it where you want it, the batters are going to be unsuccessful, right? They're not going to get a solid hit.
I agree 100%. I love a good fastball, and that's always the first thing. Like, we don't move on to anything else until my pitchers have a solid fastball, because all the mechanics for the other pitches are built off that fastball. And then change up, because everyone has to have an off speed. Everybody.
Right, for sure.
So I had that hesitation. I hated throwing curves to lefties.
And then after that, and then I was like, okay, I can do this. But I just wasn't a risk taker. So I'm like, I can get this girl out. Why would I throw a curve, possibly hit her if she's running kind of towards the plate? Yeah. And so I'm like, I don't want to just put her on first. Like, I'll get her out a different way. So, but I think my pitchers in college now, they have seen their confidence, like you talk about, grow, because they're just like, I'll throw that curveball in on them. I'm like, yes, you know, because it's you either have it or you don't, right? You can be timid and just have that fear. It's not going to be a great pitch, or you're like, let's go for it. And I'm like, oh, you're so much braver than I was.
With my students I see now, I love it, first of all. So the big part that I do love about social media is the live streams these days, because now I can see the girls playing when they go to like their PGF and their Alliance. And I watch them, and they have that confidence, like, my pitchers throwing those curves to lefties, throwing the first pitch changeup, throwing the 3-2 changeup. I'm like, you go.
I know. It's like, we're so proud. So this month of February, we have been talking about communication. And, you know, when you think of a pitcher, pitchers might think, well, I have to have good mechanics, and I need to spin that ball and get break and be consistent and all these things, right? But really, communication is a tool that pitchers have to be successful, because we can't just be in our own little circle the entire game and build up frustrations because they're not calling this pitch, or, right? I mean, there's all different things that it's a tool pitchers have to be if they want to be great and elite. And so was there were you good at communicating? Were you like, did you take charge of your game to, and I would assume that did the catchers call your game? Because my catchers did.
In college, no.
Okay.
So I was in a very unique situation, I will say, because I started playing varsity, and like not even people are even allowed to do this these days. But when I was in like seventh grade, so in middle school,
Yeah.
test called like the presidential fitness test or something to basically see if you were like safely able to play up. And starting in seventh grade, I started to play varsity softball with the high school. And in eighth grade, we got a catcher who did the same thing. Her name was Samantha Bach.
Okay.
And she made the varsity team as well. And she was my catcher all through high school. And she was also on the same travel team as I was
Yeah.
until we went to college. And I cannot stress enough the importance of having a good catcher and a catcher that understands you. Because without the pitcher having to do any work whatsoever, having that good catcher will instantly make you better. So
Absolutely.
he knew me like better than the coaches and the coach in high school, the coaches and travel, and they knew that. So she always called my games, and she knew that I liked to get ahead with the fastballs, and she knew that I only liked to throw my changeup on like if I was ahead in the count, and that my rise and my curve were, you know, my best pitches. But if I ever didn't like, you know, what she was calling, I would just call timeout, and I would have her come out to the mound. That was certainly not something I was ever afraid of. Now, when you go to college, and I see this more with my girls now, even at the high school level and the travel ball level, unfortunately, there seems to be some kind of like, a lot of the coaches have this like ego about them, where it's like, if you don't listen to my pitch calling, or if I didn't teach you these mechanics, then like, I don't want to hear about it. You know what I mean? I remember throwing in a scrimmage in my first college game, it like just in between, like with our team, and the coach called something and I shook her off. And she goes, "I've never been shaken off by a freshman before." And so it's hard. It's hard when like, you want to make your coach happy. And then you get this kind of fear where it's like, well, I'm really not comfortable throwing this pitch, but I don't want to upset my coach. And, you know, so you just throw it anyway, and you don't have that confidence.
No.
And like I said, a lot of my girls are in those situations. And I tell them, I was like, listen, guys, you're in control out there. You got to not be afraid to either call timeout and talk to your catcher, or call timeout and see if your coach can come out and tell them before the game. Tell them, look, I was just warming up and I feel like this pitch is working really well for me today. This one is kind of like off, but maybe I could throw it when I'm ahead in the count. Like tell them what you're feeling comfortable with. And if you don't like something they're calling, so like, for example, one of my pitchers has a really great curveball, like really nasty curveball. But one of her coaches, she was playing against this really strong team two summers ago, last summer, and like a really, really strong team. And she was holding them down like pretty much the entire game. And then she got through the lineup. It was like the third or fourth time through the batting lineup, and her coach was only calling curveballs. I kid you not, just curve. And I'm like, you need to shake him off and have him call something else.
Right.
It started to hit her, because how many times can you see that same curveball before you make an adjustment as a batter?
Right.
You know what I mean? And he was just calling curve after curve after curve, and that was it, nothing else. But they're afraid. They're afraid to be like, no, I want to throw something else. Like, let me change to a screwball. Let me change to my rise. Let me throw a change up in here and off speed, because they don't want to upset their coaches. You know what I mean?
I know.
I try to tell them how important it is to communicate that and throw what's comfortable for them. You know, that doesn't mean like shake off every pitch that your coach is calling. Like, no, I don't want to throw that. But if you really feel like something's better in a situation, or you're not feeling as confident in a certain pitch that day, like you need to be able to communicate with your catcher or your coach that, you know, there's something else that you'd be more comfortable throwing, or that you think would be more effective.
Yes, and I've had pitchers that they're like, I'm not talking to them. Like, oh my gosh, like, no. And I'm like, that is so, like, how, it's a reflection on you. You're the one pitching. So if you can't buy into it, then you're the one getting pulled. Yeah. So you have to be able to speak up for yourself. And so that's one of the frustrations I feel like is probably just around the country. Pitchers right? They have a pitch that you probably said, like, this is game ready. Like, I want you to throw your rise ball in a game, okay? Like, it is so good. It's ready. You have command over it. And they come back and I'm like, so how was that rise ball? And they're like, oh, he just called it one time. And I'm like,
Yes.
oh, okay. So my frustration is there is no carryover. The head coaches of these select and travel ball teams, they have never seen them throw in live in practice because they don't throw live in practice. And so they see them weekend to weekend and they have no interest to say, hey, Jill, like, can I come watch? I get it. They have life too, and it's hard. Or just like, hey, what is really working for her? What should I call? Like, the poor pitcher is just left in the middle, and we know the pitchers best because we see them throwing, right? And the coach sees them from the dugout. They don't know if they're hitting their spots or they're, I mean, they don't know. It's my, you can tell I'm just like, I get flustered because I'm like, poor pitchers. And so we talked about that in February of like, the pitching coach and head coach relationship has to be better. Now, I don't have all the answers of like, some pitching coaches do 30 to 50 a week, and that's a lot. But there has to be something if truly the head coach of this team wants to succeed, they have to know their pitcher better.
Absolutely. I agree with that, like, more than 100%. And the coach who was calling all curveballs credit, he actually called me after the game.
Okay.
And said, like, okay, like, you know this girl, like, let's discuss what we can do better next time. So that was actually really great. But again, the issue is, that ego. The coach is like, well, I know best. And the same has to do, because here's the other thing, not just with pitch calling. If the head coach would take time to, like, talk to the pitching coach and be like, hey, you know what are, Sally's biggest mechanical struggles that I can look for in a game? So that when her pitches might start to get off, maybe she likes to, bend a little bit too much, being tall. Be like, you know what, she sometimes gets a little bit bent instead of staying stacked. So make sure you look for that in a game. That could teach those head coaches what to spot in game time situations, and they can actually fix their pitchers in the middle of a game.
Right.
As opposed to just being like, well, I don't know why she's not hitting her spots anymore. I'm going to pull her. You know what I mean? And but again, that ego, they're like, well, if I didn't teach this to you, or, I know what I'm doing with this pitch calling, they want to seem like they're the ones who are like controlling everything instead of getting that help and that information from the pitching coach. But it's so, so important, because a lot of coaches I feel like a lot of coaches go into games already having made up their mind with like, this is how I'm going to have this girl call, like how I'm going to call this girl's game.
Or they call the same for each pitcher because that's just what they're comfortable.
Right. Because first of all, you have to know each pitcher. And second of all, you have to read the batters. Like, where are they standing in the box? Like, is this the fourth batter? Is this the seventh batter? Like, where did this batter hit last time? And I think that so many of these coaches just have like a set plan already that they're not going to change, instead of going into the game and reading like the different situations and knowing the pitchers. And if they would take the time to speak to the pitching coaches and be like, hey, this is Sally's best pitch. This is like, she really likes to throw this one in this situation. Instead of just going in with that plan, I think that pitchers would be so much more effective and coaches would see a lot more, wins in their games.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why we talked about is the pitcher has to know her game plan so she can then go to the coach. Because if you're frustrated with your coach, right, and it's not easy to just say, okay, I'm out, I'm going to find a new team, because a lot of coaches, they don't have experience. They weren't catchers maybe in college or high school, and they're learning how to call pitches. But the pitchers have to take control to say, this is what I want to do the first time through the lineup. I want to be heavy here. And then the second, help them. But you have to communicate. You can't just, keep it all in, right?
Absolutely.
Oh, my goodness.
I encourage all my girls to talk to their coaches. I encourage them to shake off a pitch.
Yes.
But again, there's that fear of like, is my coach
me?
Or even worse, like, if you do shake off the pitch that they call, then you throw what you want and it gets hit. You know?
I know. Right, right. Well, and it looks like you don't do this as a pitching coach, but a lot of pitchers are robotic, right? And they just, well, what do you want me to throw? And I just throw it and I hit the spot, and they don't think, and they're not in the game here because they're looking to the side of which number to, which I'm old school. I'm like, I know. So it takes away from their presence to watch the batter. Is she mad that she didn't swing at that pitch, right? And read and feel and get in the game, because they're constantly looking at the coach who's trying to be up with the hip bands. And as you can see, I'm not a fan either. But it's let the pitcher be here. Let the pitcher get into the game and feel it, instead of just being like, what do you want to throw? Okay. Ooh. And they're not a pitcher. They're just a thrower.
I hate the arm. Maybe I'm just spoiled because I did have that one catcher with me for the bulk of my career, and she called literally every one of my pitches. Like my high school coach didn't call single pitch the years that I was pitching.
Same with me. I had a catcher that was my travel ball in my high school. So we were so in sync.
And I will always be a proponent of catchers calling games. I think, and I believe that Rachel Garcia and the UCLA catcher did call their own games.
Yes.
I was always so excited about that. And you see how successful she was. She's one of the most successful pitchers
right.
of softball. And now granted, there are, college coaches who do know how to call great games, and that's awesome. But there's never going to be anyone who knows the pitcher better than the catcher. And I think that if head coaches would just sometimes set aside a little bit of that ego and allow catchers to call those games, I think they'd see a lot more success in this.
Yeah, but that comes with them being present and letting them pitch in practice to teach it. Right. And that just doesn't, I know where I came from in the Austin area, there's just not enough fields. So they have to combine teams to practice together. And I get that's a struggle, but you can find a bullpen, you can find a cage to say, hey, we're throwing live on Thursdays. Whoever wants to come and let the pitch, see what the pitchers can do, from behind. I think that if you're a coach watching, get ahead of the other teams, because people don't do that. And it would benefit the pitcher. It helps your batters see live instead of game to game where they want to work on something. And, as a pitcher, I can throw a perfect curveball in a bullpen. And then I can get in a game and it's not the same curveball, right? Because the fears and the umpire and, oh my gosh, I got to get it here. Where in a bullpen, I'm just spinning it off and it's free and I'm loose. And so the coach needs to see game-like pitchers instead of in a game where it's on the line and there's an outcome, there's a consequence. So
absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So we talked also about communicating with college coaches at camps or on recruiting trips. Is there any advice you give your pitchers when they're going to a camp or clinic to stand out or to how to approach the situation instead of, I know you wouldn't advise to say, well, I have 6 pitches and this, right? So what is your advice? What is your advice when approaching a college?
So as far as camps go, my girls are all over the place at camps. So I'm different. If I was in if I were the college coach, I would love it if a player asked me questions why do you tell me to do this? Because my pitching coach taught me to do this, or why like this? Because that shows me that you're trying to understand and actually learn, as opposed to just being okay, even if you don't agree with it or understand it. And that shows, because I always say to my girls, my job as a pitching coach is not to get you to throw 65 miles an hour. It's not to get you to be able to hit your spots perfectly. My goal is to get you to be your own best teacher, so that when you are out in the middle of that game and you miss your spot or you feel something's off with your mechanics, you can self-correct and fix it. So you don't get into those situations where you lose the confidence and get flustered. So Like that's my primary job as a coach, is to get my girls to understand the mechanics and why we're being taught what we're being taught. So when they go to a camp and see that something different is being taught, like if I were a coach, I would really welcome questions, because I would that pitcher to understand why I'm telling her to do what I'm telling her to do. But again, a lot of people don't like that. So
yeah, well, because it could come off a little like, well, my pitching coach, and it's like, right. So you have to word it to say, gosh, I've always been taught to do this. Like, tell me why you teach this, because I want to learn.
Yes, exactly. And so I would welcome that. But again, a lot of coaches don't like that. So what I say to my girls is just, go there and have fun. First of all, don't be nervous. And just go and tell them what you feel the best pitches are, like what you feel like, you get the most batters out on, and feel free to just show them anything that you want to, because I do work on all of the pitches with my girls. And, they have fairly good command over all of them. So that's really just part. As far as like recruiting goes, again, things are so different now. Because like I said, my recruiting video was on PBS and just sent in the mail. My mom had me made this like chart on a piece of poster board that was
gosh,
interested in her email or his email, the school, and then like we sent that VHS out to everyone. Now it's like, film it with your iPhone, throw it up on YouTube, email the link, or like share the video on Twitter and tag the coach you're interested in. So it's a lot easier to get that exposure now. But I always say, like, when you're communicating for that recruiting process, obviously mention your name and your year and like what your interest in the college is, that you're interested in the program. But just in like make sure you're doing it in a very professional and respectful way, like about your pitching experience. And
I would say, as a pitching coach in college, I watch a lot of videos, and the games are okay, but I can't see their movement. I can't see. They show me, they struck her out on a changeup, but there's a runner in second and third. How did they get on second and third? I'm always like, what happened there? But so pitching lesson videos are fabulous, because I can see from behind, I'm like, whoo, she's got a curveball, or okay, that, and then that catches my eye. So from that instance, but is there any questions you would have asked differently when you were in that recruiting process? Because I have some different for me. I would have liked to know, like, are you trying to recruit another? Because, it's different. Back in the day, you were like a starter and there wasn't a staff of 6 to 9 pitchers.
No.
And so I always tell, when I was a pitching coach, like, think about what would make you unhappy.
Yeah.
Right? And then it's nice to be wanted and they're like whining and dining you, but you need to interview, do you like not being a part of the team and pitchers just go off to the side? Would that make you happy? Are you going to be in a starting role? Do they see you as just a 1 inning pitcher? Right? Like, is there something you would have done differently?
Yes. I would have probably, I was definitely, and I did sometimes ask these questions, and that not all coaches, but again, this is another big thing with some coaches. Some coaches will kind of say what you want to hear. Just
absolutely.
Their school, even if it's not true. So when I wasn't pitching, which in high school I was always pitching because I was quite literally the only pitcher, which is not good. I do not recommend that because no matter how good the mechanics are, like over pitching is just a route to like fatigue and injuries. But
soreness. I mean, you're just sore. You're not fresh,
On my travel team, when I was not pitching, I would play either center field or like first base. And hit as well. I was either the first or second hitter, or sometimes I was the third or fourth, because I was a fairly big hitter. And I said that to the college coaches that I was being recruited by. I was like, would there be a chance of me hitting and playing other positions as well when I'm not pitching? And they were like, oh yeah, some of them said no, like we really we're worried about like pitchers getting injuries, which is a totally valid, concern. But other ones were like, oh yeah, totally, that's fine, which wasn't true.
Right.
So sometimes you can ask these questions and you don't know if you're getting the truth or not, but there are several questions that I always encourage my girls to ask, or to at least think about when they're deciding on, which colleges they want to apply to or get recruited by. And that is, first of all, take a look at academics, because what my dad always said to me was like, you need to make sure that the school you're going to has what you want to study, because, God forbid you go into your first game, you fall, you tear your ACL. And now you're stuck at a school where like, yeah, I love the softball team, but they didn't have what I want to study and I'm not happy here. You know what I mean? So that's always something very, very big to consider. Playing time. So there's different levels, obviously, of D1 schools. There's like the Power 5, and then there's like the lower levels of D1 schools as well. So you take a look like, do I want to go onto this team and make an immediate impact? Do I want to go out and be a starting pitcher? Do I want to go out and be a starting shortstop? Do I want to be able to play those other positions as well? Or do I want to go to one of those big Power 5 schools where like, maybe I'll be a starter if like you're really, really a powerful pitcher. Or maybe, I won't pitch as much the first year and I got to really work hard to work my way up. I'm probably not going to play those other positions or hit as much. And you have to think about that as well when you're picking a school and, talking to these coaches like, hey, I want to be a hitter. And if they say like, well, I don't really have my pitchers hit, then, that's something you have to consider. Or if, you don't care so much about that,
right,
you focus on pitching, then it could be a good fit for you. So there's a lot of stuff to take into consideration when you're communicating with coaches and when you're in that recruiting process as well.
Yeah. And I think it's fair for the pitchers to be honest, to say this, I love the school. I would be honored to play here, but I want to make sure that it's a good fit for me. Absolutely. So that after the first year, we don't have to part ways because, so am I going to be able to do this? And that forces them to be more honest. Because they don't want to waste their time as well, right?
That's huge, that honesty from the coaches, because a lot of them aren't. And I think more and more with travel coaches as well. Just like they see that this pitcher is really good and they'll like say anything to get them to come be a part of their program. And then when they show up, it's completely different.
I know. It's so sad. And like parents are listening and they're like, well, how do we know?
I know.
And you have to do research. I mean, you have to maybe, like, this is extreme and I never really even thought of it. But I mean, nowadays with social media, you can figure out a picture there and their parents and message them, say, hey, we're interested. Like, I mean, you know what? You have to do what you have to do because there's so many stories where it's different. It's different than...
Bring that up because I remember, and this was even prior to social media, my mom, when we were in the recruiting process, was like, you know what we should do? We should see if we can get a hold of the girls or the pitchers who have already graduated from the and see what their experience was like.
Yes.
Because a lot of times, even if you like, so if you go onto Twitter today and you talk to like the current pitcher of whatever, college you're interested in, they still might not be completely honest because they're still in that program and they don't want to like find out that they potentially said something negative, or if they said something positive, that's great. But so they might still be like, oh yeah, I love it, and like not actually.
I know.
If they graduated, if they really had like some negative feelings towards that, they have no reason to hide that. So if that's actually like, especially with all the access we have to people through social media these days, if you can get a hold of girls who have graduated from whatever program you're interested in, I think that's great to like send them a message, send them an email, be like, hey, I'm really looking into playing here. Really love the academics, really love the team. Like, what was your experience like? I think that could be really, really valuable and really for a a lot of athletes who are trying to decide where to play.
Well, and it holds the head coaches and the pitching coaches accountable too, because you don't get to have two faces, right? You don't get to say, oh my gosh, you're going to love it. And then they get there and they change everything about you. They don't call your go-to pitches. But I mean, when you said that, one of the girls that I've known, she has mentioned before that she was like, well, we couldn't tell you the truth or we would have gotten in trouble, like, because you think as a pitcher, you can go on the recruiting trips and then ask the pitcher, so like, what is this, and they're probably lying. I know.
Because otherwise they'll get in trouble or the coach will be like, well, why didn't she come here? Because this girl told her that she didn't like it here. You know what I mean? They've graduated again. They have no reason to. And 99% of the time, literally 99% of the time, it's like I loved it. The coach was great. It was a great experience. And but there are some situations where maybe the athlete wasn't so happy there. So it's definitely, I think that's a hugely valuable thing to reach out to players who have graduated or who have been in the program in the past to see what their experience was like.
Well, and a lot of your questions might be answered just really like digging into the stats, right? Okay, they only pitch 2 pitchers. They have 6 on staff. Am I going to be a top 2 or am I going to be right? Yeah. Am I going to complement the starter or am I just competing? Do I pitch the same as the starting pitcher? And so who's better?
Yeah.
Right. Versus like she throws this and I throw this. So I have a chance to contribute as a staff versus.
Yep.
Right. I mean,
and it's totally fine. Like when you go to college, you have to put in the work. Like you can't just show up there and be like, well, I should be the starter and that's that. Like you have to put in work, and a little bit of friendly competition is a good thing. Like compete with pitchers to see like who's really earning that time. But again, there's a lot of situations. I think less so now than it was when I was playing, but there are still some of those coaches out there who have that senior mentality where it's like, well, I'm pitching my senior and my older pitchers, even if my younger pitchers are doing better. You know what I mean? So that's not great, but again, you can definitely find that out, I think, from previous players.
Yes, yes.
And you can also tell what's also a great thing to do as far as like team, like bonding and like how the team is, how they work together and if there's like happiness and things like that. Especially, there's way more games on TV now than there used to be. And with live streaming, there's a lot more of that as well. Take a look at the dugout in between innings. Is everyone like up on the fence and smiling and happy? And like, is the other pitcher up on the fence cheering the pitcher who's in the
Yeah.
Or is she like sitting on the bench all grumpy? Like, is the team kind of just not into it? Because then you can kind of see the dynamic in the team as well. Like, are the guys there? Are they kind of just like, not given the experience? So that's a really valuable thing to take a look at as well.
Oh, another good thing is when you attend the camps, right? The players usually work it and you can see if it's clicky or if everybody is contributing and they are joyful and just excited to be there on their day off. That they're like, I got to work this camp and I love it. So I think it's all good. It's hard. It's hard making a decision and hard to just find your place, right? Where you're going to be happy, but challenged. And it's okay to be, it's hard. And it's not, college isn't meant to be like, oh, everybody's happy and whatever. You're a part of a team. And I think pitchers nowadays, they have more pitchers even on their travel ball teams, which, I mean, we had 2 growing up. It was me or her. And
same for me.
Yeah, so now they're learning a little bit more teamwork and staff, like similar to baseball, right? And so understanding your role will make you more content to say, okay, this is what my strength is and this is what I'm good at. And so, I think there's so much out there. That's why we created the show, was like, mechanics and spin are important, but there's so much to being a great pitcher. And we just want to give all that information out, make parents and pitchers think a little bit more to say, oh, I could talk a little bit more to my, just challenge them in ways that, you don't know if you don't know until you hear it. It is
that aspect. And it's also super important for the players to communicate with their pitching coaches as well.
Yes.
If something doesn't feel right, or if something, like, again, like I always encourage my girls to ask questions like why are my, because like I need to be able to explain what I'm doing and the purpose of what I'm doing. If I can't, then I shouldn't be teaching. Because that's an issue too. A lot of coaches are just kind of trying to like learn by themselves and just like are teaching what they were taught. And when, you know, a student comes to them, they're like, you know, this kind of like hurts, or like, why am I doing this? I feel like why am I missing my spot? And I've had it like a couple of girls come to me from previous coaches, and they're like, whenever I would ask a question, they would just tell me to trust the process.
I almost hate that term.
I'm like, that's not an answer. They don't know they don't know the answer, and that's why they're telling you that. And I always say the best teachers are the ones who can explain things to me like I'm 5 years old, because I don't like, you know, there's also a lot of, there's like two things that happen. There's the ones who just like can't explain anything. And then there's the ones who try to use like really big scientific. I
know.
Dad is really guilty of this. He used the word like microcosm in a video once. I'm like, Dad, you gotta stop. And there's coaches who use like really big scientific terms that like, I was in physical therapy school for a little while, so like I know what they're saying, but a 9-year-old girl who's trying to learn pitching from you is not going to know what you're saying.
Right.
Like that's the only way they choose to explain things.
I know.
I don't really know exactly what's going on either. I say the best teachers can explain things to you like you're a 5-year-old.
Right.
You understand and make it as simple as possible so that it then translates to the pitching motion. So
yes, some information that's out on the internet and I'm like, what? Like, I don't even understand this. I'm like, what are we doing? Like, parents are getting so confused, you know?
These poor parents, like you just said, these poor parents are going all over the internet trying to teach, like just trying to do the best they can and teach their daughters how to pitch. And like, there's so many different sources of information, first of all, that's overwhelming. And again, the ones who either can't explain things at all or just use such scientific terms that these poor parents are like, what? So really, as best as I can, like I said, my goal is to make my pitchers and parents their own best teachers who spot the issues themselves. So I encourage them to ask me questions. Like, if you don't understand something or you don't like get why I'm telling you to do something, stop and ask me, because I will be able to tell you why. And especially, it's also important because a lot of times, so like, it's a good thing and also a bad thing. Like, athletes these days do so much. They do other sports, they do pitching lessons, hitting lessons, strength training, and nobody ever wants to take a break or get any rest.
I know.
Off mentality, which is awful. And so then they get sore and they get fatigued. And when you get fatigued, mechanics break down. And then they're like, you know what? When I'm doing this, like, it hurts. But they won't tell me that. They won't tell me that something hurts, because then they're afraid I'm going to tell them to like take a day off. So,
I know, heaven forbid.
And I'm like, you need to tell me when something doesn't feel right. Like, I've had to say this to like a bunch of my, like you need to rest, first of all. And if something doesn't feel right, you need to tell me so that like I can take video and analyze it and see what's going on to you. Because like, so that communication between pitcher and pitching coach as well is just as important as like pitching coach to head coach, player to head coach.
Yeah. Well, and I think going back with that, it's like, I would say, okay, how was your weekend? Like, what worked well for you? What, you know, and they're like, well, I had 2 walks the whole, you know, like the information is not, it's like, I get it. I'm a parent. My kids don't want to talk to me, but you have to be able, we're a team, right? You are a team with your pitcher, and you guys are finding out the weaknesses, the strengths, and what got hit the most. Okay, well, let's see if we can get that off the plate a little bit more, or right. But it's that communication that you have to be confident to know and to to speak weaknesses, and that's not easy for young perfectionists like kids. My daughter is a perfectionist.
Especially with social media, which again, everybody with social media is a highlight reel. Like that girl who held up the radar and showed that she hit 68 miles an hour. That might be the one and only time that she ever did it. It's not like she...
And she probably did a run through.
Yeah, exactly. So, but also just that, and I do, like, sometimes you have to like pry it out of them, but it's so easy too, because like, okay, my drop ball wasn't working. Okay, it wasn't working. Like what was it doing that it wasn't going too low? Was it going too high? And they're getting better at it. My girls are like, I'm like, what did you throw this weekend? But
that's that confidence, instead of a pitcher being insecure of like, oh, it wasn't, it's like, you know, this wasn't working, and they can come in and like state the facts. And it's like, I know I'm not a bad pitcher because my drop ball was off this weekend. Yeah. So I'm going to tell you that, versus like, I don't want to tell you because then you're going to think I'm bad. And it's like, no, we're here together. Like, let's work through this. And I always tell my pitchers in lessons, like, I'm so glad you had a bad day with me, because we're here to work through it together. Versus they're so like, their parents are over there like, oh my gosh, I can't believe she's not throwing well today. It's like, I'm glad it happened here instead of the game, you know? So be real. Pitchers need to be real, be vulnerable, especially with someone that's safe. We're safe.
Absolutely.
You know?
And when you tell us when something didn't work and what happened that made it not work, then we can fix it and we can address it. If we don't know that, you're going to just go back and do the same thing. And
be average.
I love it so much, so much, when either head coaches or catchers, like if the head coach or the catcher on my pitcher's team comes to the lesson, because then you learn as well. So like one of my college pitchers has the college catcher catching for me as well. So, like a lot of times. And so now, and I'll ask the catcher questions too. I'm like, okay, so when she does this, what just happened? So that in the middle of a game, if the catcher sees that, she can call timeout and be like, hey, you know, so-and-so, I noticed you're doing this. Make sure you're using your you're staying back and not bending. And that will help as well. I absolutely love it when girls bring their team catchers or their team coaches to lessons as well. It's one of my favorites.
Yes. And it helps the parents. So the parents are like, oh, thank you. You know, they don't want to catch on the bucket and give them a break. But Jill, this has been wonderful. I love talking the game minus all the mechanics, which are important for sure, but there's so much more. And that's where I think as former pitchers, our passions come out. We live a little more today, you know, because we know what it takes, and we want to like give that to these younger pitchers.
I love watching my girls succeed. And again, like, thank goodness for live streams, because I absolutely love watching their games. And that's what I do too. I don't take like a huge number of students, because part of my goal is to like have my set number of students and help them through their entire pitching career. That our team's recruiting process. So what I like to do is watch their live stream games on Saturdays and Sundays. And if their parents text me like, oh my gosh, her curveball isn't working, then I watch and I'm like, oh, her elbow's getting away from her body. And I can help in that way as well. And I just absolutely love to watch my girls succeed and do so well.
Well, they are so lucky to have you. I can just like feel, I'm like, oh my gosh, like my girls can go to her. My daughters, I'll send them to you. But, you know, it's hard to find pitching coaches that like have the passion and the knowledge, but also love the girls, right? And so, I know.
If they were my own daughters, I want to just see them succeed and reach every goal that they want.
Yes, well, I can like get that vibe from you, so they're super lucky. Well, thank you, Jill, so much. On Tuesday, tomorrow, we will have a workout of the week that Jill has provided that she loves and has so much value to give you some focus and some command of your pitches, and so be on the lookout for that. And we will be live on Wednesday, and so I will see you soon on Wednesday, and thank you for watching The Weekly Dose.